It was supposed to be just another routine drive, but everything changed the moment the flashing red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. A young black man, calm but cautious, pulled over on a quiet stretch of road. Moments later, the officer approached, stern, cold, and already making assumptions. The air grew tense as the cop barked orders, his tone filled with suspicion. The man complied, staying polite and composed, even as the officer's behavior grew more humiliating with every passing second. But just as the situation seemed to reach a breaking point, the man revealed something that left the officer stunned and completely changed the power dynamic of the moment. What could possibly turn this tense encounter on its head? Stay tuned to find out how one simple truth flipped this story upside down. This is more than a traffic stop. This is a moment no one saw coming. The man's calm demeanor seemed to irritate the officer even more. The cop leaned in closer, his flashlight glaring into the man's face. "License and registration," he demanded sharply. Without hesitation, the man handed over his documents, his hands steady, his eyes meeting the officer's with quiet confidence. But instead of backing off, the cop began questioning him aggressively. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? Where are you headed? You don't look like you belong around here." The man kept his responses short, respectful, but firm. Each word was measured, each action deliberate. Yet, the officer's tone only grew harsher, almost as if he was looking for something, anything, to justify his behavior. The man stayed silent as the officer retreated to his patrol car, but his mind raced. What was this really about? And why did it feel like the officer was on edge, almost afraid of what he might discover? As the officer sat in his patrol car, running the man's information, his frustration grew. Something about this encounter wasn't sitting right with him. He was determined to find a reason, a justification for his actions, but the results on his screen showed nothing. No violations, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. It was as if the man's life was perfectly clean, and that only made the officer more agitated. Meanwhile, the man sat quietly in his car, his expression unreadable. He knew this wasn't about a traffic stop anymore. This was about perception, power, and prejudice. But he also knew something the officer didn't, a truth that would turn this entire encounter upside down. The officer returned, his tone sharper now, as if trying to provoke a reaction. "You think you're above the law? You think your attitude doesn't matter?" The man paused for a moment, then calmly replied, "You have no idea who I am, do you?" The officer stiffened at the man's words, his jaw tightening. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped, his hand hovering over the holster on his hip. The man didn't flinch, his calm demeanor unshaken. "I'm just saying," he replied evenly, "you should think carefully about how you proceed from here." The officer's face reddened, a mix of anger and unease flickering across his expression. He leaned closer, his voice low and threatening. "Don't try to play games with me. I've dealt with plenty like you before." But there was something about the man's unshaken confidence, the way he sat so composed, that made the officer second-guess himself. Who was this guy? The officer stepped back, glancing around as if looking for backup, his mind racing. The man's presence, his words, it all felt like a challenge, a power shift he wasn't prepared for. The tension hung heavy, and the silence was deafening as both men braced for what was coming next. The officer's radio crackled, breaking the tense silence. He stepped away to answer it, his eyes flicking back toward the car as if he didn't want to lose sight of the man. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. "Officer Reynolds, you need to confirm the name on that license immediately," it said. There was an edge in the dispatcher's tone, something that made the officer pause. "Why?" he asked, irritation creeping in. The dispatcher's reply came fast, almost panicked. "Just do it, and whatever you do, don't escalate further." Reynolds frowned, glancing down at the ID in his hand. Suddenly, his confidence wavered. The name on the license rang a bell now, faint but unmistakable. He could feel the weight of something much bigger unfolding, but he didn't fully understand it yet. Back in the car, the man waited, his expression calm but his eyes sharp, watching every move. He could sense the officer's uncertainty, and the balance of power was shifting fast. As Reynolds approached again, his steps slower this time, the man's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I warned you. Now it's too late to turn back." The officer froze, the man's words echoing in his mind. He felt his grip on the situation slipping as he glanced again at the name on the license. Suddenly, it clicked. This wasn't just any man. He was someone with power, influence, and connections far beyond what the officer had anticipated. Reynolds swallowed hard, his earlier bravado replaced by a growing sense of dread. "You really don't know, do you?" the man said, his calm tone now carrying a subtle weight. "I'm the new district attorney, the one who oversees cases, including misconduct like this." His words landed like a hammer, and for a moment, the officer couldn't speak. Reynolds' face drained of color as he realized how far he'd overstepped. Before he could respond, the man continued, his voice steady but firm. "I've been watching, listening, and now every word, every action, it's all on record." He gestured subtly to the dashcam in his car, its red light blinking. Reynolds' confidence crumbled completely. "Look," he stammered, "there's been a misunderstanding." But the man simply shook his head. "No, officer, there's been clarity." As he reached for his phone, Reynolds realized his career might be over. The twist? The man wasn't angry. He was calm because he knew the system would hold someone accountable for once. The officer stood frozen as the man calmly dialed a number on his phone. "This is about accountability," the man said quietly, almost to himself. The line connected, and he spoke with authority, explaining the situation in measured tones. Reynolds watched, knowing there was no escape from the consequences of his actions. After the call ended, the man handed the officer his documents back. "You'll hear from my office soon," he said, his voice steady. "I hope you'll reflect on this moment, not just for yourself, but for the people you're sworn to protect." Reynolds nodded stiffly, muttering a weak apology before retreating to his patrol car. As the man drove away, the weight of what had happened lingered in the air. The lesson was clear. Power doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from truth and integrity. And sometimes it takes one unexpected moment to remind everyone what justice truly looks like.